Incredible shy waitress discovers hidden talent. Touching sign language amazes mafia bosses deaf. The bell above the diner door jingled as Lucy hurriedly poured coffee into a chipped mug. The scent of marinara swirling in the air tugged at her heart, a reminder of the warmth and laughter that once filled this place. Yet, beneath the clatter of dishes and banter of regulars, she felt an unshakable weight pressed down on her shoulders. Working from dawn to dusk in this old family diner, she often forgot what it felt like to dream. Instead, she was consumed by the relentless grind of her responsibilities caring for her grandmother, whose memory was fading, while trying to survive in a neighborhood that felt both familiar and suffocating. But everything changed the moment Giovanni entered the diner. His presence reeked of danger, sending a hush through the room as patrons shifted uneasily in their seats. Lucy's heart raced. She knew his reputation but had never seen him this close. The way he looked around, scowling, it made her stomach knot. She steadied herself and approached him with practiced ease, clasping the order pad, fully aware of her place in this chaotic world. "Spaghetti," he ordered, his voice low and hoarse. As she turned to leave, she hesitated, an impulse rising within her. The wordless communication she shared with her grandmother bubbled to the surface. She signed a simple greeting, "Hello." To her surprise, Giovanni's eyes narrowed and softened as he watched her, as if seeing her for the first time. It was a fleeting moment, but it ignited something insatiable inside her, a longing to break free from the confines of her world and be noticed beyond the confines of her apron. Before she could process the budding connection, the restaurant buzzed with chatter again. More patrons poured in, and was soon swept away by the familiar routine. But that first flicker of recognition haunted her thoughts through the shifts that followed. How could someone so feared take notice of her? The weight of family obligation frowned deeply in her mind, warning her of the dangers intertwined with this newfound awareness. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The weeks wore on, and their exchanges turned into a peculiar ritual. He would come in, order the same meal, and she could feel barriers collapse with every silent moment. The gestures felt intimate, heartfelt, she expressed thoughts she never dared to voice aloud. But lurking beneath that growing connection were her family's teachings, tugging at her conscience. Fear gripped her. What if her relationship with him endangered her grandmother? The delicate balance of her duty and desire felt like a tightrope walk over a dark void. Then, chaos erupted. Giovanni faced a betrayal that sent ripples through the neighborhood, and Lucy felt the tremors beneath her own fragile foundation. As stress-fueled shadows loomed over the diner, the sense of safety she clutched since childhood began to crumble. She stood in the corner of the restaurant one night, the glow of the flickering neon sign illuminating her indecision. Every moment felt like a countdown, urging her toward a decision that could alter everything. Lucy's heart raced as doubt twisted in her stomach. Would she step forward as the woman who seized the chance to embrace her passions, or shrink away, retreating into the shadows to protect what remained? The diner, a place fraught with memories and emotions, now felt like a battleground. When she finally gathered the courage to confront the world outside her fears, an unexpected voice hollered from the darkened booth, questioning her place in this dangerous alleyway of life. And suddenly, every choice felt irrevocable. The air thickened, and her moment hung in balance. She was on the brink of defining her fate. Would she choose courage or safety? Lucy stood rooted to the spot, the chilling cold of that voice wrapping around her like a vice. It was a voice she hadn't expected, a sonorous echo cutting through the din of customer conversations and the clinking of silverware, snapping her back to reality. She turned slowly, warily. Shadows danced across the faces of her patrons, but Giovanni's gaze bored into her like molten steel. "What are you doing here, Lucy?" he asked, his voice low, tinged with a velvet intensity that sent shivers down her spine. His question hung in the air between them, an accusation and a challenge all at once. She wanted to absorb the warmth of the kitchen, hold on to the forgettable pleasures, but his presence ignited a different kind of fire within her, a challenge she had never sought before. For a moment, she felt immovable, frozen in the spotlight of that peculiar confrontation. I am working," she stammered, her usual composure fracturing beneath his intensity. "Working?" he echoed, the disbelief evident in his tone. "Is that all you're here for?" Before she could respond, an array of thoughts collided in her mind. The diner, with its familiar grease-scented aura, felt simultaneously like home and a prison. Giovanni's question cut deeper, probing her life choices and the fear that tangled every aspiration she had suppressed. She could feel the diner's walls closing in, the weight of her family obligations melding with a powerful urge for something different, something more. "I have responsibilities," she stated weakly, the words falling flat under Giovanni's scrutinizing calibration. "Responsibilities?" he pressed, his brow knit in confusion. "What about your own dreams, Lucy? Are you really going to let fear dictate your life?" That question reverberated within her, striking a nerve too raw to ignore. Suddenly, she wasn't just a waitress managing food orders, she was a young woman on the precipice of self-discovery, confronting a hidden ambition she had buried under ethical considerations tied to her family. In that moment, clarity bore down on her. She had spent so many years internalizing the frustration of unfulfilled dreams, sidelined by obligations that weighed heavily on her. The familiar resonance of her grandmother's tender care for her echoed poignantly, but also felt like a tether that had held her back, fearful that to embrace her own goodness might offend the foundation on which her life was built. Gathering the thread of courage, Lucy straightened her shoulders. "I want to help others, I want to use sign language to connect with people," she finally affirmed, her voice stronger and more determined than she'd expected. "That was before all of this." Giovanni's expression shifted, surprise washing over his rugged features. For a fleeting second, something flickered in his eyes, respect. Or perhaps understanding. Her heart thundered, this vulnerability felt dangerously thrilling. "Then let us find a way to make that happen," he said, the weight of his words sparking an unexpected alliance within the chaos of his world. Doubt brushed against her resolve. Was she ready to step into a more profound connection with him, risking everything? She felt like a tightrope walker inching across a chasm of uncertainty, with every option a potential fall into darkness. As the tension tightened, the diner eruptions continued, but Lucy's focus sharpened. Faced with Giovanni now, she saw more than the mafia boss, she saw someone who could help her discover her potential. But in stepping toward that ambition, what would she leave behind? What costs would arise from this? But a shallow thrill, with every heartbeat thudding in her ears, she could almost taste her decision. The choice danced tantalizingly on the edge of her resolution. The moment held precariously, a pivot point for her future, but before she could articulate her response, a piercing shout erupted from the diner entrance, slashing through the solemnity of their exchange. The atmosphere dissolved into panic, and in that chaos, Lucy felt the ground beneath her shift irrevocably. Now the boundaries of her reality were redrawn, safety and courage were at war. Would she grab hold of her destiny or watch it slip through her fingers? The crossroads beckoned. Lucy's pulse raced as the shout reverberated through the diner, shattering the fragile moment she had shared with Giovanni. The arrival of chaos felt like a wall crashing down, taking with it the clarity she had just begun to embrace. Instinct kicked and she took a step back, assessing the scene unfolding before her like a frantic movie. A figure stood at the entrance, an agitated customer waving arms wildly, eyes darting in panic. Someone's outside. Something's happening. The diner's patrons turned, collective curiosity morphing into alarm, the air thick with confusion. Fear crept into her heart, vying with the ambition that had just ignited within her. What was happening? Should she retreat to familiar safety or engage in the unknown? Before she could process her options, with the din of voices blending into an indistinguishable hum, Giovanni's voice cut through like a knife. "Lucy! Stay here." His request came with an authority that was hard to ignore. It was as if he still believed in her potential, even amid the chaos. She glanced at him, searching for answers, and saw that he was already moving toward the shouting customer. In that moment, something clicked inside Lucy, a spark of clarity amidst the turmoil. If she remained just a waitress, she would always be on the sidelines, witnessing rather than acting. Stepping up now could be her chance to shift the paradigm of her life forever. With her heart pounding, she followed him. As they approached the entrance, Giovanni's presence felt like an anchor. He handled the escalating situation with a calm authority, but Lucy could feel the tension rippling beneath. It was a world she had skirted around for far too long, one that now demanded her attention, and potentially, her involvement. As the frightened patron rushed forward, Lucy instinctively reached for her notepad, her fingers trembling as she recorded her thoughts. The patient hand of silence she had sought to translate through sign language began to merge with the reality of the moment. Without directly realizing it, she began to sign small calming gestures to the agitated customer, hoping to diffuse the fear clouding the atmosphere. "Help is coming," she mimed, her movements fluid and deliberate. Giovanni glanced at her in surprise, and in that brief moment, Lucy felt a wave of validation wash over her. Her hands spoke of understanding and reassurance, a bridge built in the heat of urgency. The customer's frantic energy began to subside as he focused on her signs, his breathing slowing as Lucy continued to convey gentle words of comfort despite her fear. She remembered why she was drawn to sign language in the first place. The shift in the atmosphere struck her as that primal sense of duty collided with her desires. The chaos around her morphed with newfound purpose. She was not merely sidelined anymore. The moment was morphing into something that confirmed her identity, one that spurred her forward. Just as the customer began to respond, a loud crash shattered the mild momentum Lucy had created. A dozen heads whipped around as the door slammed open, revealing a group of loud, unruly men pushing in, their intentions unclear but their energy charged with aggression. Giovanni stepped forward, his stance resolute, pulling Lucy behind him at the same time. The protective instinct within him was palpable, but so was the realization for Lucy she was no longer just a spectator in this dangerous theater. The challenge ahead represented both peril and opportunity, an unfolding confrontation with her own limitations. With a breath that grounded her, she acknowledged the risks but could feel her resolve bubbling to the surface. The unknown beckoned, each heartbeat resonating with the rhythm of potential, and her spirit braced for conflict. Would she confront the fear that had held her back? Could she embrace this emerging identity of hope that had shone through in her connection with sign language? The air crackled with tension, and as chaos loomed closer, Lucy felt the pivotal moment surging ahead. Where would her courage lead her next? The din of commotion intensified, a maelstrom of bodies and voices enveloping the diner. Lucy's heart raced, thumping wildly in her chest as she felt both excitement and terror. There, in that charged atmosphere, she recognized an exhilarating truth. She'd been waiting for a moment like this one where she could rise from the shadows of her life. As the group of men flooded the diner, their laughter clashed with the anxious murmurs of the customers. The tension was palpable. Giovanni's protective presence loomed large, his stance unyielding as he faced down the intruders. Yet, instead of being shielded behind his stature, Lucy found herself inching forward, drawn by a pulse of instinctive bravery. The lead man wore a grin that was both charming and malicious. "Just a few friends looking for a good time," he called out, but the way his eyes swept across the room betrayed an intent that made the hairs on the back of Lucy's neck stand up. She felt a rush of anger not just at him, but at the primal chaos that sought to dampen her moment of realization. Instinctively, Lucy's gaze shifted towards Giovanni, whose eyes mirrored a fierce determination mixed with unease. But then they locked onto hers, as if asking her to take a step that he couldn't. Perhaps this was the moment she had been searching for, the chance to transform her fear into something powerful. Before she knew what she was doing, Lucy stepped closer to the unsettling group. She felt something shift within her, a subtle, yet undeniable transformation. It was as if she was no longer merely a waitress trying to navigate the diner's dramas but a participant charged with an extraordinary purpose. "Hey!" she called, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The lead man turned, his amusement flickering as he regarded her with a mix of curiosity and surprise. "You think this is funny?" The change in the atmosphere was immediate. The noise hushed and Lucy felt the eyes of the diner bore into her as she pressed on. This isn't a playground for bullies. You're scaring everyone here. The realization that her voice wasn't just a whisper made her chest swell with defiance. She took a breath, channeling the grace of sign language that had been her refuge for too long. She began to sign quick, deliberate movements that illustrated her feelings. In the midst of the chaos, her hands communicated not just words but emotions, fury, strength, and a need for peace. Stop. Leave peacefully, she signed, infusing her gestures with a force that mirrored the determination flooding her chest. The lead man shifted, uncertainty creeping into his bravado as he processed her message. Giovanni caught her eye again, pride mingling with astonishment. Lucy felt a rush of empowerment. She was taking control, exceeding her own expectations. The act of signing felt like an extension of herself, a declaration of who she was becoming, a woman who could confront her fears and their manifestations head-on. Yet, she wasn't out of the woods yet. The rest of the men remained unpredictable, their agitation feeding off the tension. Lucy sensed a potential volatility, their delight turning sharper, threatening violence. But she didn't want to retreat now. This was a pivotal moment. As she planted her feet firmly, Lucy realized she was standing not only for the diner but for herself. The choices she had made, the fears she had faced, all led to this singular reality. She felt a stirring of alignment within, her voice, her hands, her essence all converged in the heart of the storm. She stood ready, pulse thrumming with kinetic energy, ready to challenge the chaos around her. A thought pierced her mind. She was not just fighting for survival, she was reshaping her identity. The lead man took a step forward, eyes narrowing. The tension ramped up, the moment hanging precariously. What would happen next? Would her courage hold firm against the tide of uncertainty, or would the chaos extinguish her flame? Lucy braced for confrontation, heart steeled with newfound resolve. This wasn't just about the diner anymore, it was her rebirth. The decision to embrace her power amid chaos. In that pivotal instant, she understood that the challenge was not just external, it was an inner battle to be claimed. As the first words of confrontation slipped from her lips, the din transformed into a silence that shimmered with possibilities. Would her courage be enough to reshape her fate? The answers hovered just beyond reach, waiting to be seized. The lead man's smirk shifted to a scowl as Lucy's challenge pierced his bravado, a subtle vulnerability creeping into his demeanor. He clearly didn't expect her to stand firm, let alone confront him of all people. Her hands continued to fly through the air, signing in defiance, yet she knew the stakes were higher than mere intimidation. This was her moment to command respect. The oppressive weight of the room pressed down on her, yet it felt liberating too. With every movement, she pieced together a semblance of power she'd never thought possible. She was no longer relegated to being a mere bystander, thrust into the tumult facing her would-be oppressors. This new version of Lucy embraced the risk of visibility, bravely stepping into the glare of judgment. The gang's tension manifested physically as they shuffled and exchanged glances. The lead man, perhaps torn between his desire to project dominance and the need to reassert control over his group, hesitated. It was a crack in his facade, and Lucy seized it. Beneath the bravado, she sensed his uncertainty mirrored her own previous fears she'd worked hard to dismantle. In a way, she understood him. Walk away. Her voice rang clear across the room, buoyed by her conviction, radiating towards him with a powerful, unyielding grace. She could feel Giovanni's eyes on her, a steady force grounding her amidst the turmoil. The silence hung in the air, a suspension of time where Lucy felt every heartbeat echo. Amidst the deluge of doubt and fear, she recognized a spark within her, a realization of what it meant to be a leader, a protector of truth. Sensing the gathering tremor beneath her skin, she confronted another layer of her psyche. Could she keep pushing back when the world demanded retreat? As if sensing her resolve, the lead man snorted derisively. You think a couple of hand signs will scare us off? Who do you think you are? He stepped forward, shoulders squared, like a beast ready to charge. The tension in the room thickened, leaving an unsettling pit in her stomach, yet, her instinct urged her to act decisively. With another swift motion of her hands, she signed, "You're choosing fear instead of understanding." Choose compassion. The words flowed from her like a tidal wave, crashing against the barriers built around ignorance and aggression. To her surprise, a flicker of doubt crossed the man's face, as if the challenge had tied into something deeper within him. The crowd around her seemed to collectively intake a breath, sensing the raw potential of the moment. Lucy recognized the impact of her newfound voice and vision reaching into the heart of the chaos, offering an alternative, but then, the air shifted again as another man from the group cracked an uneven smile, signaling the tension was far from resolved. The lead man glanced back, gripped by some internal decision-making process. She noticed him wavering, and in that fraction of a second, doubt slipped away from her. If he opened his mind just for an instant, her plea could resonate louder than the threats of his crew. The battle within Lucy raged on. She wanted to believe that one voice, one moment of courage, could incite a change both within her and potentially within him. Yet, doubts quenched that hope. The potential for violence still was thick, a lurking shadow that whispered reminders of her former self, the pacifist craving to avoid conflict at all costs. Committing to this confrontation felt like navigating a tightrope strung between fear and confidence. Could she maintain this resolve? Could she pull it off long enough to evoke genuine change, or would her flame flicker too soon? That lingering uncertainty gnawed at her resolve as she faced the group. The moment hung heavy, weighed by the gravity of decisions left unmade. The consequences of any further action could lead to violence, jeopardizing everything. But still, perhaps the embodiment of who she was becoming depended on this very confrontation. Steeling herself, Lucy prepared for the impending fallout, knowing she would have to dig deeper into her courage than ever before, for the power to shape her destiny lay squarely within her hands. As the lead man steadied his breath, eyes narrowing in defiance, Lucy's heart raced. What was the next move that would define this pivotal juncture? The moment stretched into an eternity. Lucy could feel every fiber of her being vibrating with a mixture of adrenaline and uncertainty. The lead man's expression shifted to one of calculation. He was weighing his options, his bravado faltering. In that flicker of vulnerability, something inside her clicked into place, awakening a resolve she hadn't known resided within her. She breathed deeply, the sudden quietude of the room amplifying her thoughts. This was more than a call to action, it was a confrontation with her past, a reckoning of her strongest fears. Her journey had been riddled with moments of self-doubt, but the confidence she had begun to build now flared brightly against the backdrop of this very real challenge. For the first time, she felt the weight of her voice carrying the potential to sway not just this man, but the very course of her life. Compassion can be stronger than fear, she continued, making sure her signs were deliberate and fierce. Each movement spoke not only to the man but to herself, an affirmation of the power she was beginning to finally take command of. She dared not look away, grounding herself in the moment, her heart pounding as she realized how deeply she needed this affirmation. For so long, she had settled into the shadows, allowing others to dictate her path. But here, now, she was reclaiming her narrative. The atmosphere crackled. The lead man hesitated, but the small victory felt precarious amidst simmering tension. One of his crew sneered, breaking her concentration, urging her fears back to the surface. What if they turned violent? What if this moment, meant for empowerment, escalated into chaos? Just as her mind spiraled into darker realms, a strategic thought broke through. She had power over her response. You can only continue this path if you choose to feed into that fear, she signed, her fingers dancing with conviction. The room's energy shifted, the air growing dense as the men noticed the confident stance she took. She was not just defending herself, she was inviting them to see a different perspective, one where strength could manifest through understanding. The lead man's scowl deepened, but Lucy noted how his grip on certainty seemed to slip. She pressed on, debating how to better connect with him, recognizing that this was about more than the moment, it was about the voice of her own existence. But in a rapid succession of thoughts, clarity struck her, bridging fear and opportunity. I know you have stories buried within the bravado. You wear a mask, but what if that mask could whisper the truth? She continued, attempting to form a bridge between her courage and his conflict. Behind every hardened exterior, there lies an untold story, an innate humanity waiting to break free. In that moment, something flickered behind his eyes. Was it recognition? Or was it irritation? The tension morphed, yet she spoke through the throbbing uncertainty. Break the cycle. Show them you're more than this. A deep breath exploded from him as he clenched his fists, a tumult of emotions flooding the space between them. Lucy's heart thundered, resonating with the critical juncture they both experienced. With a fiercely grounded resolve, she opened her hands and extended her palm toward him, signing slowly, "This can change, it starts here." Suddenly an unexpected laugh escaped one of the other men, causing Lucy's stomach to drop. The lead man glanced at his crew, the conflict visible in his brow. Would he yield to camaraderie or be consumed by their mockery? Uncertainty rippled through the group as Lucy's chances teetered on the cliff of possibility. Suddenly, a decision loomed larger than before, a pivotal divide in Lucy's journey. Did she push for the trust she longed to establish, or would this remnant of her past return to claim her, leaving her vulnerability exposed? The world around her expanded to hold both fear and hope. She stood tall, bracing for whatever storm approached. Would her decisive moment break the cycle of hostility, or lead to the surrender of her newfound authority? As Giovanni murmured words of encouragement from the background, Lucy's next move would determine the legacy she would finally embrace. A choice lingered there in the air, waiting to turn the tide. Lucy's heartbeat echoed in her ears, the laughter from the crew still lingering in the air like a threat. Every cell in her body tingled with a fierce intensity, igniting the courage she had barely felt before. This was her moment. It was an intersection of her past fears and her burgeoning sense of self. The lead man's lingering uncertainty was more tangible than the laughter that had just pierced the tension. As she studied him, she leaned into that uncertainty, feeding off it like a flame. Lucy's chest tightened, thoughts racing. What if he laughed at her again? What if he revolted against her call for connection? Yet, in a spark of defiance, she reminded herself that hesitation would only reinforce their bravado. She had chosen this moment, and she would own it. Each of us carries a story, she signed, her movements fluid and confident. The room remained tense, eyes flitting between her and the men before her. She sensed how palpable the atmosphere had become, revealing her inner strength as brilliant and raw as the emotions surging around them. What if you let your story breathe? She asked, surprising even herself with the challenge. Each sign was a step toward the precipice, a way to coax forth the tenderness she believed was buried beneath their rough exteriors. The lead man's eyes narrowed, caught between contempt and curiosity. In that suspended time, she understood the nature of fear. It clung to people, heavy and suffocating, blurring their identities into shadows. She wanted to dismantle that fear, piece by piece. Lucy intensified her focus on the lead man, her essence projecting an assertive hope. What would it mean to shed the mask? What if vulnerability could be your strength? The lead man shifted. Lucy saw it, a flicker of doubt creeping into his hardened demeanor. Decision hovered in the air, begging to be acknowledged. She had seen this vulnerability ignited in herself before, the possibility of catharsis when one allows themselves to be stripped bare. Your men follow a persona, but what happens when the persona falls away? She pressed, attempting to pierce the ice that encased him. What if you allow them to see the man inside? For a split second, Lucy's boldness felt like a tidal wave threatening to crash against their fortified walls. She was ascending toward her own breaking point, hoping to lift him with her. The laughter faded into a dull whisper, leaving space for the confrontation she craved. The weight of the words spoke beyond the room, pulling at something deeper in all of them, yet, the crew remained skeptical, the tension in their body language tightening like coiled springs ready to snap. Would they allow her to break through? She could feel Giovanni's supportive presence behind her, a reminder that she was not helpless. Failure loomed just as closely as triumph, and it fueled her resolve. Suddenly, the lead man stepped forward, his expression unreadable but his body language shifted. As he crossed the invisible line of loyalty to his crew, Lucy felt a shift inside her too, a small opening of a door she hadn't realized remained locked. "All right, let us see what you've got," he grumbled, an edge of challenge framing his words that sent a thrill through her. This was it. The line drawn between relinquishing authority and reclaiming her narrative receded. Holding her breath, Lucy prepared to seize this moment. She could not falter now that as the first signs of connection spread between them. She understood she was no longer just a shy waitress trying to find her place in the world. This was a dynamic she was crafting. Unexpectedly, as she drew her fingers in graceful forms, the faint hint of a smile tugged at the corner of his lips, but beyond this fragile cusp of agreement loomed the darkness of self-doubt intertwined with newfound identity. Would this fragile trust hold as she stepped further into the unknown? Lucy's next move was pivotal, a culmination of everything she had learned so far. Would it reinforce her burgeoning sense of strength or unravel in chaos? The stakes had escalated, and uncertainty clung around them like a mist, obscuring what lay ahead. The real challenge had merely begun, and both of them stood on the brink of discovery. The moment paused, the room holding its breath in anticipation of Lucy's next move, the tension thickening like fog around them. Lucy's heart thundered in her chest, but she held on to the lead man's gaze. His challenge was not merely a test, it was an invitation to delve deeper, to confront whatever lay beneath their hardened exteriors. She inhaled deeply, letting the quiet settle within her before she released it slowly, grounding herself. In that heartbeat of silence, Lucy realized that vulnerability could be as powerful as strength if wielded wisely. She prepared to trace a new path, not just for herself but for the men watching, curious yet guarded. "Let us explore," she signed, her fingers dancing gently in the air, each movement deliberate as if sculpting ideas from a formless block. "Tell me your stories, or at least, the fragments you're willing to share." A murmur passed through the crew, the skeptical gaze of the men momentarily softened. It was a flicker of interest, a threshold crossed. The lead man, caught in the momentum she had created, hesitated. "What if our stories aren't worth telling?" The softness in his tone surprised her, and it was a gateway to something deeper. With each sign she crafted, Lucy felt layers of doubt peel back, revealing a burgeoning confidence that surprisingly, she had not recognized before. It wasn't solely about revealing stories, it was about understanding the weight they carried, the blame, the loss, the choices that circumscribed their lives. "Every word matters," she signed with fervor, feeling the truth of her message resonate in the air. "You carry experiences like badges, not burdens. What if sharing them relieves some weight?" The lead man's expression shifted again. This time, the hardness in his face cracked ever so slightly, vulnerability seeping through the cracks. The crew, too, began to lean in subtly, their defenses dropping. "Fine," he said, his voice rough but expectant as if he were backing down from some unspoken threat. "I'll start. But if this becomes a pity party, I'm out." The challenge in his gaze was a flicker of fire that ignited a spark within her. Here lay the potential for revelation, not just for him but for the entire crew and ultimately, for herself. "Just listen," Lucy urged as the weight of his story unfolded with ragged breaths and trembling hands. As he recounted moments filled with a mix of pride and regret, she felt her heart constricting. He spoke of choices that had led to darker paths, of a childhood masked by bravado, of dreams squashed under the weight of expectation. It was not just an admission, it was a communion of souls. As he revealed threads of his past, those around him began to share as well. Each story built momentum, a rush of shared understanding passing through the group, spanning lost hope and hidden sorrows. Lucy's vulnerability mirrored their own, and she couldn't help but feel the lightness that spread across the space. This was no mere challenge, it was a metamorphosis, for them all, a realization that their stories were intertwined in unexpected ways. Yet, as the tales grew more profound, the fear of exposure gripped her. Would they view her as weak as she bared her own scars? Could her battles resonate in a world so painfully different from theirs? Panic reared within, but she quelled it, her focus sharpening. She cleared her throat, ready to share her chapter, the story of a shy waitress longing for connection, crumbling under expectations, yet rising like a phoenix, emboldened by her journey. As she began to unfold her tale, words flowing as gracefully as her signs, she could feel the room shift. Genuineness was becoming a bridge between them, a conduit of raw, unguarded humanity. But just then, the door clicked open abruptly, and a shadow fell across the threshold, a new presence marking an invasion of their moment. Instinctual tension returned, the conversational lull replaced by a visceral unease. Who stood at the cusp of this fragile connection they de-built? The anticipation grew thick around Lucy, demanding her attention away from the profound and pushing her into the unknown. Would this new arrival derail the progress made or challenge her to confront the truth she was just beginning to embrace? The newcomer remained silhouetted against the dim light of the hallway, casting an imposing shadow that seemed to expand across the room, drowning out the soft glimmers of connection that had just sparked among the crew. Lucy's pulse quickened, the tentative trust they'd built hung in an uneasy balance, teetering perilously on the edge of disruption. The lead man shot her a quick, anxious glance, his confidence wavering as he processed the abrupt intrusion. Lucy could feel her own anxiety bubbling, yet the urgency sparked a defiant resolve within her. She might share her own story, daringly, but this moment of vulnerability was not solely hers. If they had begun to open their hearts, she was determined to protect that possibility. "Who are you?" the lead man demanded, his voice low but edged with authority. Lucy noted how he instinctively positioned himself between the unseen figure and her, protective yet territorial. The unknown presence stepped forward, revealing a wiry man with slick back hair and an expression that oscillated between amusement and scrutiny. "Just a friend," he said, his tone layered with condescension. "Thought I'd drop by and see why everyone suddenly needed a therapy session." His mocking glance flicked to Lucy, and though she felt a pang of hurt, she clenched her fists, ready to face this challenge. With a flick of her fingers, she signed to the crew, "Let us not lose our focus. We were just getting somewhere." The urge to retreat into herself battled against her need to assert her place in this moment. The irony wasn't lost on her, she had only just begun to embrace her own vulnerability, and now it felt at risk of being exposed again. "Why are you even here?" she voiced, turning her attention to the strange man. "You don't belong to this circle." "Oh, but I do," he replied with a self-assured smile, crossing his arms. "You see, these tough guys," and he gestured dismissively to the crew, "can't help but spill their precious secrets when a pretty face comes along." The insult landed like a slap, forcing Lucy to stifle her own surprise and anger. It was a taunt, a deliberate attempt to diminish her role in this fragile space they had created. She felt a surge of protective instinct, not just for her own burgeoning identity but for the men who began to reveal their truths. "Maybe you should listen instead of judging," she challenged him, taking a small step towards the lead man and the others. "You have no idea what they've been through. Their stories aren't just entertainment." His eyebrow arched in incredulity, but Lucy sensed a shift, an undercurrent of bemusement mingled with frustration in the room. The men exchanged glances, their interest peaked again, uncertain but willing to stand by her. "Let us share," she pivoted sharply back to the crew, emboldened. "Let us keep telling our stories. No one can take that away." The lead man's gaze met hers, now filled with something deeper than uncertainty, perhaps respect. That flicker of doubt in his eyes transformed and shifted to a spark of protectiveness toward her. Yet the strange man laughed, a harsh, mocking sound, eager to undermine this newfound flame. "Seems like you've enthralled the minions," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "But remember, darling, it's easier to pull someone down than it is to lift them up." In that moment, Lucy recognized the threat wasn't just from him but in allowing fear to creep back into their fragile space of authenticity. Her heart raced, knowing she had a choice, retreat or push forward. She felt the weight of their stories still swirling around her, a reminder of the shared strength she was fostering. "Then let me show you," she countered, her determination unyielding. "Maybe we can surprise you." Their stories shared reignited a fire inside her, stoking the embers of resilience she had thought extinguished. The fragile connection so easily toppled could ignite a brighter light, but in the depths of her mind, another unsettling question arose: would this moment galvanize the crew or place them in peril? The tension crackled anew, leaving Lucy aware that whatever she did next would be crucial. She steadied her breath, feeling the shift within her, eager to stand firm against the doubt creeping back. "Why don't you join us?" she signed, intention unwavering. "Let us see if it gets boring, or if someone here shows you what real stories can do." The stranger's face darkened as he weighed her challenge, caught in the balance between scorn and curiosity, poised to answer in a way that could potentially reshape everything. Fear thrummed in the air, coaxed to break free, urging Lucy to brace herself for the tension that loomed, a new layer of complexity in this unfolding narrative. Would this adversary relent or lash out in defense of his own insecurities? The impending moments promised confrontation, an intersection of choices that might lead to revelations about their realities, rippling through the fabric of their circle. Would the fragile threads they had woven be pulled taut, or could they hold steady against the unseen storm? As the newcomer glared at Lucy, the weight of her momentous choice pressed heavily upon her. The spark of empowerment ignited by her newfound voice felt precarious, like a flame threatened by an incoming storm. Yet in facing this challenge, Lucy sensed the power surging within, realizing this was not just a test of her resolve, but a path toward personal liberation. "Stories connect us," she signed emphatically, turning her gaze back to the crew, drawing strength from their tentative alliance. "Each experience is a thread in the fabric of our lives." She understood now that communion lay in vulnerability, it was the antidote to fear. The lead man's eyes narrowed, but she noticed the flicker of understanding behind his hardened exterior. With every word she articulated, she unspooled the tight threads of trepidation that constituted her existence, intertwining more deeply with the men around her. This was not merely an act of defiance, it was a reclamation of her essence. "Listen, you don't know what you're talking about," the stranger scoffed, feigning indifference. Yet the tinge of uncertainty in his voice betrayed him, he was captivated. Lucy clasped her hands together, bating her breath. "It's not just about us, it's about belonging. When we share, we defy the darkness." Each sign transformed into a resounding truth she had longed to express and, in doing so, dismantled her own fortress of fear. Lucy took a deliberate step forward, anchoring herself in the heart of the overcoming battle. "Everyone here has a choice," she declared. "You say it's easy to pull someone down, I say lifting each other up is the real challenge. But we can do it together." The air crackled with a new energy, the tension shifting like the atmosphere before a downpour. It was palpable, vibrating with anticipation that a moment stretched long and tense, the question still hanging in the room. Lucy felt the swirl of stories and emotions coalesce. This was her purpose, her chance for real transformation. The other men began to instinctively lean in, their interest piquing, an unspoken understanding blossoming under her defiant light. "You're right," the lead man finally broke the silence, his voice surprisingly steady now. "We are what our stories make us, and mine needs to break free." As he spoke, a resolute calm washed over the group, the winds of change sweeping through the diner. Each eyes shifted toward him, their protector, their friend, their potential to embrace understanding. Lucy felt relief rush over her, a testament to her burgeoning confidence. "You see, we're here because we're ready to let go of the burdens that confine us. For too long, I let my fears keep me from expressing who I am." Her hands moved deliberately as she shared her story, till she was just a waitress with dreams silenced by tradition, now rising anew into her power. Carlos, the lead man, nodded unfazed, opening the door for camaraderie. "All right," he beckoned, daring the others to share. "Let us turn this around. Let us see what truth lies behind those masks." As laughter erupted in faint echoes, Lucy felt a surge of pride blossom. Each brave soul recounted their tales. One spoke of childhood dreams thwarted by tangled loyalties, another shared loss stifled under burdens not meant for them. Each vulnerability they released resonated deeply, knitting a stronger bond among them. Lucy noticed the once kept stranger shift uncomfortably, the realization of their identities standing unmasked in defiance against predictability. "Maybe they're onto something," he said, his voice caught between sincerity and incredulity. "What if this isn't just a passing phase?" "We'll see," she countered, forcing herself to maintain eye contact with this adversary. "Stories have the potential to ignite compassion. Don't underestimate how powerful that can be. She felt empowered, no longer walking the line of what was safe, but stepping boldly into what was true. I didn't expect this, the stranger conceded finally, somewhat perplexed as the conversation turned to moments of hope interspersed with hardship. It was clear he was processing the collective weight, perhaps intrigued by the roundness of their experiences. I embrace this, Lucy affirmed with clarity. Each of us must confront our edges, obliterate judgment, and give our experiences the attention they deserve. The wave of warmth encircled her, the breakthrough solidified a path towards healing and deep relational work amongst the group. The stranger remained, and as tales forged a deeper connection, it became apparent that both teams, those immersed in turmoil and those wanting to change, could transcend barriers. In that moment, as Lucy prepared to share the formidable challenge she had surpassed, she felt the glow of realization, a confidence swaddled in acceptance. "And this is why we speak," she exclaimed, her hands fervently crafting shapes in agreement with her voice, to reclaim our identities and shape our destinies into beautiful narratives of strength. With the last echoes of laughter mixing with renewed resolve, a marked change reverberated within her, a testament to her evolution. The weight of obligation had faded into the realization that her dreams no longer stood in contrast to her responsibilities, rather, they had intertwined, propelling her towards authenticity. Now welcomed into a space where stories intersected, Lucy grinned among her newfound family, a belonging she had once thought unreachable. She had confronted the chaos, staked her claim in the dialogue of her life, and through that defiance discovered remarkable clarity, a powerful force forged by truth, telling that it was time to own her narrative. "Never lose sight of what makes you, you," she reasserted boldly, feeling the voices of everyone, hers included, finally converged. As they embraced this journey of understanding, Lucy knew she had achieved what once felt insurmountable. She had transformed the weight of her past into the wings of her future, soaring with purpose, pride, and an established identity that would continue to flourish. As the evening drew to a close, she took a moment, looking at everyone around her, connected, engaged, and liberated. Her journey remained a story in the unfolding, but now she possessed the means to navigate it with courage, confidence, and clarity, a newfound authority over her narrative that promised fulfillment. Now, the call to action rang true. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm that supports us. Comment your reactions and theories about this ending. Your voice matters. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to spread the message of resilience and transformation.